Good evening and welcome to a new edition of A Daily Debate. This evening we'll be debating the Egyptian pound versus dollar, and more importantly, how is this affecting our economy? Are we on the right track? With us this evening is a distinguished panel that will be shedding light on this. With us this evening is Her Excellency Senator Dr. Pacinthe Fahmy, member of the Egyptian Parliament. A pleasure as always to have you
with us. My pleasure, thank you very much.
With us also this evening is Dr. Ala Az, who is the Secretary General of the Federation of the Egyptian Chambers. A pleasure as usual to have you with us. Before we start our discussion pertaining to the Egyptian pound versus dollar, we'd like to pay our respects and deep condolences to the family of the Egyptian which was killed in London yesterday. 21-year-old engineer Adil Habib was burned to death yesterday in London. According to members of his family, his uncle to be specific, his uncle said that Sharif was actually stabbed to death before he was burnt. With us on the line is Mr. Sharif al-Demirdash, who will be commenting on this issue to give us the latest updates. Mr. Sharif, can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you shed light on this tragic incident? How far are we in terms of the process of investigation or statements by British officials, since it is on British ground?
Well, first, the presidency, they issued a statement, asking the British authorities to give details about the investigation surrounding this crime, this horrible crime. The Parliament, through its Foreign Affairs Committee, it issued also a statement requesting the British government to make clarifications concerning this crime.
Yes.
The Ministry of Egyptians, abroad, or also it is very concerned with the issue, and the minister itself, which is responsible for Egyptians living abroad, she is traveling to England, as I assumed, as I have heard, and she's following the investigation. Let's say that the British government or the British authorities, they are very, clear about the issue, that they are conducting an investigation, and they did not yet reach, let's say, a final statement describing exactly what happened and what are the causes and who is, being charged for this crime. The investigation, it's in early stages, and we have to wait and to follow. We are concerned exactly not about the crime in itself. Crimes do happen. We need just explanations, and we need to know, and we need to be sure that the responsible for this crime against an Egyptian citizen, he will be brought to justice. And the whole, let's say, the whole explanation about what happened is logical, and we have the right to know first what happened exactly. We have the right to see the responsible for this crime brought to justice. So.
Mr. Sharif, do you think it's a regular crime, as in an attempted case of burglary? For example, someone wanted to take his car, someone wanted to actually steal something from him? Or do you think it might have maybe some political connotation, it being coincidentally held on April 25th, which is marking our Sinai Liberation Day, and it's a day that, well, some were not wanting to join in the celebrations.
You see, I cannot speculate about the causes of this crime. I mean, it will be wrong to make ties or to make any kind of speculation regarding this crime at this early stage of investigation, police investigation. My personal point of view is we have to wait and see what is the outcome of the investigation, whether it's a normal crime, I would say, like for burglary or maybe disputes or
Yes.
But I cannot say now whether this is political or related to any incidents or occasion, or let's wait and see. The main thing is to follow up vigorously what is going on. We have the right to know. We have to know exactly what happened to our citizen, and his family is entitled, like any other family in the world, to know the truth and to see that the responsible for these crimes are brought to justice, and this is the main issue.
Mr. Sharif al-Demirdash, thank you very much for your fruitful input. Well, we don't want to go into details since there's nothing really to go into, but one thing is clear, that according to our ambassador in the United Kingdom, the investigation process is actually taking place right now, and right now I believe they're looking at the videotapes, which should clarify a lot of issues. And I think the videotapes, well, within a couple of hours you can actually flick through the whole thing and find out who was behind it. So the investigation should not really take a lot of time in such an advanced country, let's put it this way. Let me start off with what will be happening tomorrow, and maybe go back on that, and that is the central bank will be holding a meeting tomorrow to go into the regular meeting, their monthly meeting, their monetary policies meeting. And maybe until we look at this report and come back, I'd like to ask you to take out your crystal balls and predict what's in store tomorrow. Will we see a rise in the interest rate? Will we see a decrease in the interest rate? And this will not be appeasing a lot of people. Or will things remain the same? We'll be right back to answer the question right after this, so please stay with us.
Stagnating foreign investment and export revenues, plunging tourism revenues, and dwindling Suez Canal receipts have contributed to a short hard currency and the rise of a resilient parallel market over the past years. Hence, the central bank's recent monetary policies reform. CBE Governor Tariq Aamir said the CBE is committed to paying back a Qatari deposit of $1 billion as well as $800 million to the Paris Club in July. He added that he will work to transform the banking sector into a real financer for growth and development rather than targeting securities trading. He revealed his intention to continue the crackdown on the informal dollar market, saying it is likely for the dollar to fall from 9.7 Egyptian pounds to 4 pounds, though the anticipated dollar flow to Egypt in the next few years, which could boost the foreign exchange reserve to $25 billion from the current $16.5 billion. He predicted the profits of the National Bank of Egypt to jump to 10 billion Egyptian pounds by the end of this fiscal year by offering the United Bank to a strategic investor and selling 20% of the Arab African International Bank, as well as increasing the capital of Bank Dukair by 20% through the Egyptian exchange. Economists and bankers welcome the Central Bank of Egypt's decision to adopt more flexible exchange rate policy after a sharp devaluation of the Egyptian pound as much-needed measures to address the foreign currency crunch. CBE decided to adopt more flexible exchange rate regime that better reflects the underlying forces of supply and demand, and in return lead to greater transparency and foreign exchange liquidity through attracting greater investment and the correction of asset prices. Last March, the CBE sold $198 million to local banks, allowing the Egyptian pound to depreciate. by over 14% of its value of 8.85 Egyptian pounds against the US dollar, a prelude to having a flexible exchange rate and letting the market decide where the pound is. According to economists, investors need to see a flexible exchange rate regime because Egypt is not a country which can afford to peg its currency against the dollar like oil-rich economies, which have massive inflows of foreign currency income. To attract foreign currency into the country, Egypt's largest two state-owned banks, National Bank of Egypt and Bank Misr, launched 3-year Egypt-denominated investment certificates for individuals at 15% yield to be paid in hard currency. Some believe the pound should and will fall further than the level it reached in order for the devaluation to have a lasting impact on the FX crunch. The magnitude of the move is not sufficient to clear the market or fully resolve all challenges because of the look on the non-deliverable forwards. On the Egyptian pound, the market expects the pound to reach 10.45 Egyptian pounds against the dollar by the year's end. Analysts say the central bank is operating under many constraints: slowing global economic growth, slow global trade, the weakening currencies of most of its trading partners, and falling oil prices, which negatively affects grants and private investment, tourism and remittance from the GCC countries. Egypt's foreign currency reserve, which have been used to prop up the pound since the country's 2011 uprising, have stagnated at around £16.5 billion in recent months. Given all these constraints, it is a very positive move, which notably reduces the premium on parallel markets against the official rate. An outright floating of the pound would require a stronger and sustainable source of FX, which Egypt currently lacks, according to analysts.
Welcome back. Senator Pacinthe, can you tell us what do you expect should come in terms of monetary policies out of tomorrow's meeting?
Tomorrow is a very difficult meeting because, like I was talking a few minutes ago, we have a big problem with our budget. The budget, 80% of the budget is going to salaries, service of debt, and subsidies. You're left with 20%. Any increase in interest expense, in interest rate, will eat part of the 20%, which is a very critical.
You can't afford.
You can't afford. So I don't think they would raise the interest expense, the interest rate. I wouldn't like to see this. Maybe they keep it, but decrease as well, difficult. So I don't think they would raise it.
Why did they raise it since it is eating up in our budget, which is already...
Because they wanted to attract Egyptian pounds to the system. We have a problem of liquidity. Most of the bank's liquidity is going in investment to treasury bills, meaning investing in financing the government deficit. So you needed liquidity in the banking system, so you had to increase the interest rate. This is from one side. The other side, they wanted to encourage people to change their dollars into Egyptian pounds and keep it in deposits. So the issue actually started when your reserves were eaten, basically, throughout the years. I don't want to go into details, but most of the monetary policy used during that time up till now, in my personal opinion, is not addressing the main issue, which is the reserve. So we're left with a very critical situation. I don't know, you want to talk about the dollar now or after a while? So, but I think tomorrow, I do not think they would raise the interest rate. I don't think so.
Okay, Dr. Ala, what's your opinion? Will they raise, will they not raise?
No, touching the interest rate at this stage is not the tool to be used. So I don't think that this will be an issue whatsoever. But I think who doesn't learn from his past has no future. So let's be realistic. If you look back in 2003, 2004, we're in the same situation, even it was a worse situation.
But we did not feel it was worse. The people did not feel it was bad.
Because you didn't have that much transparency, that's all. So at the moment, everything
Or is it
so
that we had more reserves?
No, the reserve was less. No, everything was worse than today. Actually, 2003, 2004, the situation was not as rosy as it is today from several perspectives. The point is, there are several instruments in the hands of the central bank within the fiscal policy that can be utilized. They used a couple of important instruments and they were correct. If we look back in 2005 when the dollar was around £5 and look forefront today, 10 years later, where we were fixing the dollar at a synthetic price.
Yes.
The difference between the inflation in the US and in Egypt, in the US was always less than 2%, in Egypt was around 10%, the official rate. So you're talking about 8% annually difference. We synthetically maintained the price, the exchange rate of the Egyptian pound.
Because you wanted to
keep it.
Protect certain people.
A fiscal policy
a country that
looks at two
whose
items.
economy is based on importation. You wanted to protect those people to keep importing at a cheap price.
Actually,
this is what happened.
That's not the key issue. The key issue is that we were considering it God and glory that touching the exchange rate, this is the biggest insult to Egypt. This is the flag of Egypt. And this is not true because you had the European Union, you had China, you had Turkey, they all devaluated by around between 20 and 30%. So there is no difference between us. The point is, we maintained two things that we were looking at, and these are supposed to be instruments rather than a goal. Maintaining the reserve and expanding it, and this should not be a goal, it's an instrument that you use when you need, and the exchange rate. The difference over a decade that we synthetically maintained, you had about 80% synthetically maintained difference in price. So what the governor of central bank did was he actually readjusted and put what we call the fair price of the Egyptian pound, which is the official price that we have today. But during that period, you had a major problem. You had grass-hopping phenomena where the exchange rate in the black market was jumping very fast. This induced that everybody, the barber, the housewife, everybody started switching their money to dollars, putting more pressure on dollars. I do not believe that Egypt has a lack of foreign currency, but you don't have it in the banking system. And not all of it is in the black market. The majority of it is in households. And what you need to do is to induce sort of a herd instinct. If the instruments that the central bank took were all done in the same day, this herd instinct would have worked. But what happened is they gave a gap of 2-3 days between every action that they did. And this gave enough leverage for the black market to survive.
Can we bring into discussion here, when we talk about the black market, who is the major stakeholder in the black market? Because this is important in saying whom is manipulating.
The major let's look at the raison d'etre for the existence of the black market. The central bank back in February last year issued several regulations, I can't even put them under the name of policies, that forced anybody who needs to get raw materials, to import finished products, whatever, to utilize a black market. And you induced that this black market went out of Egypt. It became in Dubai and in Jordan. So practically, you cannot fight it when it's outside your borders. So you induced a situation and you kept protecting and defending that situation where, okay, the actions had a good rationale, but they failed. And you never throw good money after bad money. When you see that it failed, you have to put a line and say, I'm stopping and I'm canceling. This was done very late. So this gave sort of an expansion of the black market. There are key players in it who are still fighting because this is their bread and butter. They're fighting all the guidelines and the regulations of the central bank. The solution is that the central bank has to dump a huge amount of foreign currency. You go to the bank, you want foreign currency, it's available. You take whatever quantity you want.
From where?
From the reserve, of course.
Actually,
it's not important.
If they have done this with the devaluation, with the increase of interest rate, all in the same time and in sufficient quantities, this would have solved and killed the black market, because the majority of foreign currency available in Egypt is not in the hands of the black market. It's in the hands of lay people. And if they see the dollar going down, they will start a snowball effect of selling what they have, so more offer than demand. And this started actually when the devaluation was done. But it was not completed with dumping sufficient amounts like it was done in 2004. This was the mistake. What we expect is this, whether the central bank likes it or not, they have to do that sooner or later. What they're waiting for is two things. That they have enough muscle of, I won't call it reserve, but having enough input coming into the country where investments actually started flowing. We've had over the past few weeks, we had the King of Saudi with 350 business people where a number of contracts were signed and the money came in. This was followed by the French and the Germans, even the
Bahrain.
King of Bahrain is now, we have the Czech. So Egypt is becoming now the destination for investments. But the money of investments to switch into the banking system and into the economy and to be switched into Egyptian pounds, this takes a while, and this while depends also on how the ease of doing business in Egypt is, how fast you allocate land, how fast you give licenses. And this is one channel that the government has to work on. This is not the central bank's job. This is the job of the government. And they're starting to do it, but not at the speed that is required.
Dr. Pacinthe, I sense you have comments, but maybe I'd like you to comment on the issue of the reserves. Can we right now afford to take more out of reserves and inject it?
If you don't have enough reserves, if you don't have, I repeat, enough reserves, you cannot manage any situation. And the issue is that we lost our reserves. So we lost control. If you go to the banks and they can finance you and allocate the dollars for you from proper channel, it's from the reserves. If they cannot allocate you, they have to go somewhere else. And this is what happened. Now the problem is not even you go somewhere else. The problem now, can you find the dollars? That's the issue. My personal opinion, I don't care how much is the price of the dollar. But I care that I have thousands of factories. If they do not find dollars, this would be a catastrophe.
They will stop.
Definitely. And now you have 75% of the labor force employed by private sector. The second major issue as well is that if you you don't have dollars to import medical requirements, medicines. If you have to import as well the major things like wheat, like food, everything. I mean, the issue now is not the price of the dollar, but it's the availability.
How can we get this availability?
You have to have a proper level of reserves. You have to.
How?
And I'll tell you how. And you have to work on it. And I've mentioned several times that if we in Egypt, we cannot do it, we can go to one of the major investment banks and they can show us what instrument should we launch so that we could attract dollars to be converted into pounds, like the treasury bills, to be able to build again our reserve. Because if you're going to wait for tourism, wait for export, wait for foreign...
tourism, there's a problem. The Suez Canal, it's
definitely.
Economic...
The factories will not wait for you. You see? So this is a critical issue. And I tend not to agree that the reserves are not the main issue. The reserves are the main issue. Because when you have a reserve, you can comply to the requirements of your banking system and the industries and the major imports. The problem, we lost our reserves. Fine, we can work on it, but I repeat.
But how can you get them taking into account?
This is what I'm saying. You have to have an investment banker.
No, it's gone. You can't save.
You have to get, if we cannot do it locally, this is a job known everywhere in the world. You get professionals to show you what instrument should you launch to encourage people. I personally bought on Mexico a few years ago some instruments of that type. I bought bonds, and they were paying 8.5% on the bond. All of us, we bought on it, and they paid best. You have to have innovative instruments. But if you're going to stand like this waiting, that tourism will function, inshallah, investment will come. This is serious.
Can I ask you here, because here I'm not only addressing the banker by profession, but I'm also addressing the parliamentarian. The government presented a program recently and the parliament approved the program. Did you sense, because what you're talking about is really in the hands of the government, this is the government's job. Did you sense that the government has this idea that they have a plan to increase the reserves?
No, it's not only the government. This is a joint responsibility between the central bank and the government. Because the government should take some actions on its part, and the central bank, because this is a separate, the monetary policy is totally different than the fiscal policy. Fiscal policy talks about taxes, and I don't know what fiscal policy has to do with the price of the dollar, because you mentioned it several times. I mean, the monetary policy is the responsibility of the central bank. Fiscal is the government, but I don't think it has to do with the price of the dollar. So I think, and we have a joint committee, okay, which is the commissioner committee. They sit together, but as far as I understand, they did it once and they stopped, as usual.
The government, central bank, and the parliament.
Yeah, the government, the central bank. They sat once and then they didn't meet again.
Weekly.
They don't. So I was sure, I asked yesterday, they told me we're not meeting. So I told them, if you're not meeting, so there's no solution. I mean, because there are things in the country you cannot do on one side. You have to do joint, you see. So I think if we cannot, we spoke about it in the parliament when we invited the bankers and people from the central bank and from the government. We talked about it in details. This is not a thing which could be left to time. You cannot afford, when the factories would like to have their raw material.
Has the parliament formed this economic committee to address those issues?
Yes, of course. We had our first meeting today. I mean, after we finished the major requirements on the 2.5 or 3 months early, we finalized a lot of laws and regulations. But now we started our first meeting today, and it was the economic committee, and we invited people from the central bank and from the government. They came and spoke to us, and we discussed this at length, because if you do not have enough foreign currency in the legal system, in the banking system, you're in deep trouble. So I will remind you of one thing. A few days ago, a very big factory in Mexico was burned.
Yes.
So the owner of the factory came out and said, well, this is an accident. It was not burned because of economic problems. I want everybody to listen to this, because maybe several times we were together and I spoke about it. Don't push the people to do this. Because at the end of the day, if you cannot bring raw material to your factory, what are you going to do? You're going to close it? It's impossible. So this is not a simple problem. It's not even like the deficit in the budget. This is a critical one. So if we don't address it seriously, you go nowhere. It's not the price. I repeat, I don't care about the price at the present time. And I mentioned it several times. Get the dollar at any price. Increase the reserves at any price. No matter, because when you bring in one of those investment banks, it will cost you. I don't mind. But I have to have reserves, so that the central bank, when a bank wants an amount of money to sell it to one of its clients, whether he wants to import raw material or he wants to import major products from abroad, he can get it from the banking system. And he doesn't run around in an illegal manner, and then at the end of the day you go into problems. You cannot run like that. When you talk about investment, you cannot talk about investment when your market is not well controlled. You see what I mean? If an investor comes in and then asks you, how can I get the dollars if I want to go out? What would be the answer? Look for it in the black market? It's unacceptable. So I think it's a major issue and it has to be addressed. We spoke about it today in the parliament at length.
Dr. Ala, you want to comment? And maybe in your comment, I'd like to also touch on the issue of charity starts at home. How can we get the Egyptians who have the dollars, and I don't mean the few dollars, but who have the money to put their money in their banks?
Actually, I'll answer in reverse before commenting. Actually, historically, Egyptian women, we're talking about the lay poor people, used to have her money in gold in her hands. This is how she walks with, and this is the way she looks at security. This is replaced by dollars these days. We're talking about everybody in the country looking at dollars as the winning card for making quick wins. And this has to change. I'll contradict Dr. Pacinthe in a couple of small things. We're still looking at some issues and considering them taboos. One of the number one issue that has to be done is to enter into a standby agreement with the IMF. This is one thing that I don't know why we consider that, again, this is the honor of Egypt, that if we do that, where, by the way, over the past few years, we have done 10 times what has been requested in the previous standby agreements, which we didn't deliver. So this is, the importance of it is its impact on Egypt becoming more attractive for investments. And more important, what Dr. Pacinthe was mentioning, is that you can shop from the international market at very low interest, with longer grace period, with a longer tenure.
So why don't we do this?
Another taboo. The problem is we have never been looking at the disease itself, we were rather looking at the symptoms. So it's as if you have a major sickness and I give an aspirin to reduce your fever. To me, this is the reserve. The reserve is a thermometer showing the economy, which is important, which is very important, and the bigger it is, the more secure I am, but this is not the goal. This should never be the aim. The problem is, if you look from 2011 to 2015, where we had the worst economic situation, where we had lots of problems, banks were closed more than once, FDI was practically negative, tourism was practically zero, yet nobody complained about the absence of foreign currency. It was available. We did that to ourselves.
Wow.
When we came with this February regulations, where you put a ceiling, I can't understand even the logic behind putting a cap for depositing in the bank. I can understand withdrawing. I had a business person who was complaining to us that he came officially from Sudan with a couple of $1 million in a suitcase. He proved them in the customs when he entered in the airport and went to the bank. They told him 50,000 per month. So he can stay 3-4 years.
But this is apolitical. This is to regulate.
I'm just talking.
I understand, but this was done, it was a political issue, not an economic issue.
Regulate by fighting the market forces. According to the Constitution, we're a free market economy, which is a regulated free market economy. However, you do not, you're the one who
But you're not in regular circumstances. You're in a state of war. So sometimes
the point
policies...
we were in the midst of two revolutions, and the dollar was not jumping as it has happened recently, and it was available, which is more important. And it was entering the banking system. What you did is you created sort of a treat to black marketeers. You forced the private sector, and by the way, and public sector also, to deal through the black market, and you moved even this black market outside the country. So you created a very synthetic, huge bubble that will burst in your face, and the only solution was to cancel these regulations, which was done, but done after almost a year and something. So the impact and the damage has happened, where the money that used to flow, especially the repatriations of expats that used to flow into the banking system, our exports, a big part of the exports and a big part of the service revenue stopped coming into the banking system. What you need to do is to regain the confidence, and this confidence cannot be regained except if I go to the bank at any time asking for any foreign currency, I will have it. Then when I have a revenue in foreign currency, I'll deposit automatically. It's not the matter of waiting for investments, because actually investments already are there, and there's a big part of them that's already being transferred into Egyptian pounds to build factories, to build projects that foreign investors started doing. So the income, the in now is becoming more than it used to be in the past 3 months. Tourism is increasing as revenue, both number of touristic arrivals as well as, no, actually it is increasing. Bear in mind, we were going down. The number has been decreasing. We reached a plateau over the past month, and now it's slightly increasing. Which means the trend is becoming positive. So what you need to do is just to bring back the confidence into the system. And that's why I was mentioning that the fiscal policies is more important at this stage, because this is what will give the confidence to the investor, to the Egyptian investor, to the Egyptian who's holding foreign currency in his hand.
Fiscal policies adopted by the government.
Adopted by the government. This is more important than what is done by the central bank at the moment. And they have to talk together. We're talking about synchronized economic policies.
But shouldn't I'm not an economist here, and maybe my question might sound extremely naive, but shouldn't the central bank put a system, a financial system, and the government works its program in accordance with this financial system?
No, because according to the constitution, the central bank is independent.
I understand it's independent.
Doing its monetary policies within the economic policies of Egypt, which means that whether the central bank likes it or not, though it is independent in taking its actions, but it has to synchronize what it's doing with the monetary policy that's put by the government. They have to. And what we've been witnessing over the past few weeks is lots of synchronization in that direction. However, the impact of that and having sort of a repercussion on the market will take some time, simply because you need to regain the confidence in the economy. For Egyptians first, before foreigners.
When Dr. Ala was saying synchronization, you shook your head. You
when we said the monetary policy set by the government doesn't set the monetary policy.
Yes,
the central bank.
He said the fiscal policy and the monetary policy. He was referring to the fiscal policy.
Fiscal policy is
the central bank has to work, has to base its policies
to coordinate it with it.
Based on what the fiscal policy is.
No, I don't see the relation, honestly. They're different. But again, we have a big problem.
Is the central bank adopting, because one of the statements made by the governor of the central bank, said that he has a plan whereby he will be reducing the dollar.
Yes, he might have a plan.
These are official statements.
It could happen.
Increase for a while and then...
Yeah, it could happen after a while when investment will come. But the issue is, as I said, can you afford waiting for that while? Can you afford waiting to find the dollar? I'm not saying
for a country that is import-oriented.
Exactly. Even not import-oriented, your raw material. You have factories operating, they need raw material. The problem, as I said, is not the price of the dollar these days, it's the availability. How can you get people to trust the banking system, take the money from home and put it in the bank? Because rumor has it at the street level, because when I talk to people outside, well, if you even have $1,000 and you put them in the bank and then you go to take your money, the bank will refuse to give you your money. Because people talk about this.
This is what people say. These are the rumors.
Many people talk about this. You see what I mean? Whether it could be true or not, but many people talk about this. And this is serious.
How can you change this perception?
You can change by making the availability of the dollar in the banking system. We used to go to the banks, as Mr. Ala was saying, we used to go to the bank, you want to buy an amount of dollar. No matter, you buy. No, you cannot.
Where can you get the dollar from? Because this is from the reserve. This is what Dr. Ala was saying.
You cannot choose the money of the people. You have to get the money when you sell money, dollar for the people. You sell it from the reserves. You don't sell it from my deposit. No matter how much deposit you make with the bank, they're yours. Nobody takes them and sell them to somebody else. No. They take them if you exchange them to Egyptian pounds, so they form the reserve. You see what I mean? So if all Egyptians will go to the banking system and place their dollars, you cannot choose. You cannot choose. Because your currency is not convertible. No way.
If I don't have a dollar account and I want to get dollars and you have the dollar account.
No, of course not. Of course not. Why? Because your currency is non-convertible. But this is the issue. Many people said the Egyptians put their money in the banking system. So, you want to take it and give it to others? No way. You can let it.
This is still a problem, because that means if I don't have an account, I can't find dollars in the bank.
It's not a problem. Just a minute. you have to differentiate between two things. The money of the people, dollars of the people.
Which belongs to the people.
You cannot sell to others.
Okay.
So no matter how much you're going to bring from your market, if they're placed in the banking system in dollars, you don't touch.
Okay. If
Now
not
the banking, let me continue. The banking sector, what can they do with those dollars? They can lend them to companies who have sources in US dollars, so that they take your dollars, lend a part of it, some calculations. This kind of company, for instance, touristic company, an exporter, he will bring back dollars, he pays you back. But if I place in the bank dollars, the bank cannot sell it to you.
Okay, so that
This is very important to understand, and that's why I said reserves, because the reserves are the money, they belong to the country. They buy it from us, keep it, and then sell it to importers, sell it to the people who wants to bring raw material. But no matter how much dollars you want to place in the banking system, in your deposits, in your accounts, nobody can touch it.
So let's go back to one thing, because this is an issue that
This is a major issue. If people will take an idea that if they place their dollars in the banking system, you will use it, they will not put it.
This is the idea that people have, by the way.
Exactly.
If I'm a factory
This is
owner
dangerous.
and I need the dollars,
You take it from the reserves.
Can we afford, and you were just saying that we have a problem, so in return you don't give the factory owner because we can't afford to take from the reserves.
That's why, no, we don't have reserves. That's why I'm saying you have to have instruments used to increase the reserves.
So that you can give the factory owner to
But if all Egyptians will bring their money kept in in houses, place it in the bank, these are not reserves you can't touch.
So this will not solve.
No, of course not. Of course not. I have an account in dollars in the bank. I do have. Do you think if I feel that the bank will sell my dollars, I will keep them in the bank? Why the situation is like this in Egypt? Because your Egyptian pound is not a free currency. It's not a convertible currency. So no matter how much you place in the banking system, nobody can touch.
Okay, we have 2 minutes left. I'll give each one of you 1 minute to make a closing
Okay,
statement.
one important thing. We used to import between 60 to 80 billion annually, 2011, 12, 13, 14. And the money, the revenue of Egypt, whether export revenue, tourism, Suez Canal, repatriation of expats, was covering this. What's happening today is the revenue is still capable of covering our needs. But there is a lack of trust, and most of these revenues don't enter the banking channels. And when I mentioned that people will start putting their money in the banking system, I didn't mean that they'll put it in dollars, because interest on dollars is very low. They'll put in the Egyptian pound so they can earn higher interest on them. And all this could be summarized in one thing. People regain trust in the system, whether exporters, whether touristic companies, or expats from abroad. This is how it should be.
Senator Pacinthe.
Egyptian tourism, export, or Egyptian expats, they convert their dollars into pound. So they create for you the reserve. But if you want to export and place in the bank your dollars as dollars, you didn't do anything. You see what I mean? That's why the problem is a bit complicated. That's why I said we need instruments which could encourage us to change our dollars into pounds, and then this builds the reserve. But if we place with the bank $1 billion of yours, nobody can touch it.
But if the value of the dollar increases, why would I change it to Egyptian pound?
Exactly.
Knowing that
So you have to
increase.
You have to have your reserves.
I mean, if it's going to increase tomorrow, I will not convert it. Does it make sense?
No, people do not. But unless you have, you see, it's a very complicated matter. You increase your interest rate, for instance, on the pound. If you increase your interest rate, you hit on your budget. It's not that simple. It has to be done in coordination with the government so that they put a proper plan for a specific instrument sold outside, so that encouraging people to bring, not to Egyptians, I mean to the funds who have a very high level of liquidity, they can give you 1 or 2%, especially that during this period when you place dollars in the banking system abroad, sometimes you pay interest rate. So you could place a small amount like they do with the treasury bills on an instrument created by one of the big investment banks. They will tell you that's the instrument which could be attractive. It will cost you so. That's why I repeat it several times. No matter how much it costs, build the reserves, please.
Senator Pacinthe, Fahmy, Dr. Alaaz, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I know it's not an interesting topic, but we have to talk about it.
Well, it's not only interesting, it's a lifeline for us here in Egypt, and it's something that we all have to address and work on together and spread the correct information about it. If you put your dollars in the bank, they stay in the bank. No rumors, please. On that note, I'd like to wish you a very pleasant evening. Tomorrow another day and another debate, and good night.